Hi, hello. A lot of people here, I love it. Thank you for coming to my talk. This is really exciting for me because I've been a volunteer at this conference and now I'm up here on stage. So that's really a huge honor for me. So thank you to the organizers for having me. Also, my voice is not usually this horrible. I'm just sick at the moment, so please bear with me. I would be willing to bet that a lot of you are currently feeling very uncomfortable in these chairs, because these chairs are horrible. Now, at some point, somebody decided to design it this way and thought, you know, this is a good idea, this is what a chair should look like. And these chairs are usable, you know, you can use them in the sense that you can sit in them and they will support your weight, but the experience of using them is not exactly the best one. So that's what we'll be talking about today, not chairs, but usability. We'll talk about what usability is, what it's not. We'll talk about what it means for free and open source software. We'll also talk about some misconceptions, which I called lies in my title as clickbait to attract more people to my talk. I see it has worked perfectly. So they're not really lies, they're just misconceptions. And we will also look at some ways to combat those misconceptions if you notice they started to appear in your community. In the end, we will offer some advice to people who wish to improve usability in their software projects, whether they are leaders, maintainers, or just regular contributors. So I'm not a usability engineer, I'm not a developer, so this is the moment when even more people start leaving the room. I work as a technical writer. I create software documentation for Creation's cybersecurity company called Reversing Labs. Some of you may have heard of it. I know some of you for sure have heard of it. But anyway, we're currently hiring. We actually have some positions open, so if you're interested in working at a cool cybersecurity company, you can catch me outside after the talk and we can chat about it. I also contribute to the KDE community in their promo and marketing department. You probably know about KDE. They make the Plasma Desktop and Plasma Mobile and a bunch of cool applications. So depending on the circles you're in or the communities you're part of, news you follow, you might have noticed that usability has become kind of a hot topic recently. There's two reasons for this. One is software is now being made for a number of different platforms, different devices, and design paradigms need to change to accommodate those new types of platforms. And the second reason is that big groups of people are now getting access to those new platforms, they're getting access to the internet, and these groups of people are different, they have different needs. For example, there are school children, there are elderly people, there are people from underdeveloped countries that have slow internet, or people with low education levels. And as a software manufacturer, as someone who provides software as a service, it's obviously in your best interest to get those people to use your apps on these new platforms so you can make money. So it makes sense that you will start caring more, reading more, writing more about usability and about making your software more usable. Of course, despite all this, usability is not a new thing. It's not just a fad or a trend. It's been around as a concept for as long as product design has existed. And in terms of free and open source software, usability has come to prominence in the early 1990s and then had sort of a resurgence in the 2000s. One of the big important events was a large usability study in 2003. It was carried out by a German usability testing agency called Relevantive. They compared usability in Windows versus Linux, and this study sparked a big discussion and renewed interest in usability in big free and open source software communities, especially in KDE and GNOME. So usability is not the same thing as user experience. They are related though. Usability impacts user experience, but they're not the same thing. Generally, usability focuses more on the functionality, and user experience focuses on the emotional response that your software evokes in the users when they are interacting with it. Usability is also not binary. It's not something you can like turn on or off by flipping a switch. Usability is more a degree or a scale of things. So you can have low levels of usability in your project or high levels. And well, we talked about what usability is not. Maybe it's time to say what it actually is. So there is a standard definition. There is an ISO standard that describes what usability is, and if you Google it, you will probably find a definition like this, which is a good definition. It has some keywords, you know, for example, learnability. How fast can I, as a user, learn to use your product? There's memorability. Do I quickly forget how to use it? Will I remember how to use it when I come back to it? Efficiency. Does it help me achieve what I want to do with your software? And there's also satisfaction. Satisfaction is a bit of a problem here because it can be very subjective. The same problem happens when people describe usability as making software user-friendly or easy or simple, because there is always the question, user-friendly to whom? Simple for who? Easy for who? If it's easy for a developer or for an advanced user, it doesn't mean it's equally as easy for beginners, right? So maybe we can improve this definition and boil it down to something like this, which is basically what usability is all about. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's related to a number of other concepts, as we mentioned before, to user experience, to user expectations, to accessibility as well. And when you start looking at all these concepts, you realize one thing. You realize that usability affects your entire software project, your entire community, not just the code. And this leads us to the first of those lies or misconceptions. So this is what developers often think, that usability is just design, and then they say, it's not my job, I'm not a designer, so I'm not gonna bother with it. Of course, that's not true. So the underlying issue here is that people perceive usability as something that affects only the user interface, and as we explained before, this is incorrect because usability is important for all aspects of your software. So that's your code. Do you use comments in your code? Where do you host your code? How difficult it is to fork it, for example. That's your build and release process. How are your packages built or maintained? That's your documentation. Is it well written? Is it translated into other languages? Even if it's well written, but it's difficult to access, you know, it's not that usable. Your APIs, your services, are they consistent? Does using them make sense to the user? Usability basically affects everything. Another issue with this misconception is that people sometimes realize the importance of usability, but they just don't have time to deal with it, or they think it's something that should be handled by an expert. And this is actually understandable, especially if you are a lone developer, someone who works on a project on your own. So a good way to resolve these issues, or maybe, you know, decrease those misconceptions, is to get more people to join your community. So find contributors who are experts in usability and who will help you. They will work with you on your usability issues. You can also try to get your whole community on board. You can spread awareness about usability, teach people, you know, what it means, how to apply usability standards. You can also start a community-wide goal, which is what we did at KDE Community. So the whole community voted on which things we should work on for the next 5 years, and usability was one of them. If you have money from donations, you can also invest in actual education and training of contributors to teach them how to do usability testing, for example. You can also organize usability-focused sprints, which is a good way to get things done quickly. Next lie. So this is very common, sadly. So this happens when people think their software should be left as it is, or they think it doesn't have any issues because it works for them. You know, this works for me, I love it. Nobody ever reported any issues with it, so there are no issues with it. But maybe issues exist, but they're not getting through to you. So it could be a problem with the communication channel. Maybe users are just not able to report usability issues because, for example, your Bugzilla system is too complicated. Or maybe people are writing terrible reviews about your application on social media or somewhere, but this information is not getting through to you. Again, another way where this misconception is visible is with different types or advanced software, where people think, oh, my software is too advanced, I don't need to follow these usability guidelines, which, I mean, yeah, this has a lot of options, but how do you really use it? I mean, usability, as we said, applies to all types of software, regardless of whether it's a command line application, for example. You can have basic usability standards for command line applications, expectations that users have of your application. For example, tab completion, they expect to be able to complete commands by pressing tab. They expect you to have some sort of documentation or a man page maybe. They also expect your switches to work consistently. So how do I get, the version number of this command? Is it just switch V or something else? So people who think like this, they will often tell you that they don't need to fix usability because their app is built on common sense. And the problem with common sense is that it's often not very common. It can just boil down to some very subjective view of what an application should be. And the problem here is the curse of knowledge, actually. The curse of knowledge means that you, as a developer or as an advanced user, you know so much about the app, you're unable to perceive the beginner's issues because you use it all the time and you use it in a very different way than just a basic regular user would do. So you are not your users. You're not able to fully comprehend the issues that they are encountering. So things that you can do to maybe remedy this are the following. So if you think your software doesn't have any usability issues or they have never been reported, you can go out and actively seek feedback from users to see maybe there is something actually that is worth fixing. Instead of following the common sense, maybe try following actual usability standards and human interface guidelines. Many software communities, free open source software communities, publish their HIGs on the internet. For example, GNOME does, KDE does. You can find those. You can freely use them in your design projects. And it's always worth investing in documentation, because if you think, okay, I have this advanced piece of software, it has a lot of options, I like it this way, I'm not going to change it, but people are still having trouble using it, maybe at least try to fix that by improving your docs. Next one. So this misconception arises when people start to realize that usability is important, but they still think it's not measurable. And they think that because they see it as, usability means that software is simple or easy to use, and simplicity and ease is, again, very subjective and therefore difficult to measure. However, efficiency can be measured, and efficiency is one of the things that usability is actually about. So you can measure, for example, how long it takes for people to complete a certain task with your software. You can measure the number of steps it takes for them to complete an action. You can compare different methods of interaction. For example, how long does it take for them to do something only with the mouse versus only with the keyboard? There's a bunch of things that you can actually measure to get a real look of how usability of your application could be improved. Second thing, people also tend to identify usability with more features. So they think adding more features to an app will make it more usable, which just creates a mess in the end. And you have to remember that the customer or the user is not always right. So you have to find a balance between not listening to your users at all and adding every single request they make into your application. You can, people are always going to complain about something. You cannot satisfy all of them, but you can try to aim and find, issues that the majority of them is complaining about and fix those first. Give them priority. Different people want different things from your application, and it often happens that some of them use it in ways that you never intended them to be used. So that's something to think of. So what you can do to actually measure your usability efforts You can measure, for example, the number of resolved bugs and correlate that with positive feedback you're getting from the user. So you have a list of usability issues, you measure how many of them have been resolved in a specific period of time, and then you correlate that with the recent positive reviews or feedback you've gotten. You can also start with focused research, so you need to define which usability issues are the most pressing, so you can start tracking them, so you can actually get some numbers and hard data. Again, you can also recruit people to help you with usability testing if you're a very small team or a single person. Look for contributors to join your project, or just give your application to someone to use, your friend, your grandma, whoever, and take notes what they're struggling with. So those will be your first most pressing usability issues. And well, you can also collaborate if your community has a promo team. You can also collaborate with them. They can help you find frequent complaints, frequently asked questions that people ask on the internet, because if you're a developer, you probably don't have time to read all that. So they can compile a list for you and they will send this to you, so you will know what people are struggling with. And yeah, last but not least, don't try to be everything to everyone. As we said, you cannot please all types of users. So once you have a clear vision of what you're trying to do, just stick to that. Or you can follow the KD mantra that we're trying to do, make things simple by default, powerful when needed. So that's also worth thinking about. And this is our actually last misconception, or maybe the darkest one. I don't know. So this misconception is based on the fact that many free and open source software projects start as a single person scratching their own itch. So they have a problem that they are trying to fix just for themselves, and they don't really care if you as a user have trouble with it. They think that resolving those usability issues you reported is just a waste of time. Another reason for this is that usability is often perceived as less interesting, less important, less valuable, or less prestigious than coding. So many communities expect you to have some kind of merit to back up your suggestions. So if you're coming into a new community as a usability expert and you don't really have any code to back up your suggestions, you're probably gonna be rejected, right? So the reality is thankfully a little bit different. So of course some communities are like this, but not all of them are, and that's a good thing. And a lot of these misconceptions are based on similar prejudice and bad experience from past. It's not like that anymore, thankfully. Also, another clear fact is that with free and open source software, at least you have an opportunity to open a discussion about something that bothers you, because if you found a usability issue in a proprietary piece of software, what could you do? Like, good luck trying to get that resolved. You could maybe contact their support and complain to them, but you can never get an open discussion with the developers themselves and the ability to submit your own suggestions to improve things. Free and open source software projects are organized in different ways. Some of them are more democratic than the others. In this case, there is no one-size-fits-all approach, but there are still some things that you can try if you want to highlight the importance of usability and help such projects improve it. So you can get people to vote on your suggestions. For example, you have a suggestion to resolve a usability issue. You can get community members to vote on it, or you can solicit feedback and support from users, and then you come to the core maintainer and tell them, look, all these people want this changed, maybe it's time to actually change it. You can also just, think about whether it's worth trying to help someone who doesn't want to be helped. I know this sounds like I'm telling you to quit, but actually there's so many different free and open source software projects that need usability help. And if you encounter one that doesn't want your help, maybe just spend your time wisely, don't waste it, move on to someone who actually wants your help. So we've went through the misconceptions or lies, so now we're just left with one truth. Are you ready to be hit with this? Or hope so. No. Usability is not optional. So we've seen that many of these misconceptions have a lot in common. They usually undervalue and dismiss usability as something unimportant, something that can be fixed later. And this stems from not understanding the impact that usability can have on your entire project, not just on your code. So usability cannot and should not be an afterthought. It has to be part of your development process right from the start, if possible. You need to start thinking about it early, and you need a vision for your project that implements usability and makes room for it so that you can develop it properly. And you have to think about the fact that your users look to others for guidance. So they will look for reviews from other users. And if there are fewer bad reviews about your application or fewer usability issues reported, that means you will get more users, you will get more good publicity, more good reviews possibly, and this just becomes a chain reaction where a positive experience with your software, thanks to a high level of usability, leads to more users, more contributors, more opportunities for you and your project, even in terms of donations, money, stuff like that. It can also help you be more competitive against proprietary software, because if you have two applications that are completely identical, one of them is proprietary, one is free, and the only difference is that the free one has a lower degree of usability. If you fix this, you will compete directly with the proprietary one, and in most cases, your application will win because, well, it's free to use, right? People don't have to pay for it, and that still matters to some types of users, right? So what does all of this mean for free and open source software? If we accept that all these misconceptions are incorrect and we rephrase them like this, well, generally speaking, usability is still not seen as a priority in many free and open source software projects. When there is a usability issue, they will treat it generally in one of three ways. They will ignore it and leave it unfixed forever. They will resist change and tell you to patch it yourself, or they will, go the complete opposite route and just add in everything that people request, and this results in a huge mess, and it's even less usable than it was before. However, good news is that this scenery is changing. There's a growing body of research that shows that open source software developers actually care about usability, and they really appreciate feedback about it, as long as the feedback doesn't interfere with their priorities, right? And you can also be part of this change, because now it's the right time for that. If you care about usability, if you want to help your favorite projects with it, you can help them find motivation for it. You can help them ask the right questions. Why do we need usability in the first place? And then you will find a bunch of reasons that will point to actual usability issues in those communities or projects. So, maybe we want to improve it because a lot of people are complaining. We're losing users, we're getting bad reviews. Maybe it's hard for new people to contribute. It's hard for us to maintain our code. Maybe we have a lot of old legacy code or some bad design paradigms that need to be updated for the new types of devices and the new technology that's coming. So once you have all that, once you've established the motivation, you can start actually working on usability issues by following this formula, which I think you already know. Use, study, share, improve. That's the 4 main software freedoms, right? And they also apply very nicely to usability. How? Well, you can use your own software in different ways. You can use it on slow computers, on old computers. You can use it only with the mouse, only with the keyboard. You can use it with your eyes closed, using a text-to-speech interpreter or something like that. You can use it in different concepts to understand how different people perceive it and what their needs are. You can also use other people's software to identify good or bad design practices, design patterns that appear. All of this can help you improve the usability of your project or the project you're contributing to. Study. Of course, you can study usability standards. You can learn how to do proper usability testing if that's something you're interested in. You can also, as I mentioned, utilize all those human interface guidelines that are published online freely. You can adapt them to your own needs. Then you can share your findings, things you've learned. You can share your suggestions for improvement with the community. And finally, you can improve based on the feedback you get from the users, from contributors, from your friends, from everyone. So there's actually a lot of things that can be done to improve usability if you care enough to do it. why not start today? You can go out and start preaching about the importance of usability in free open source software. I think you'd be good at it. Thank you. That's all from me. Do we maybe have some questions? I think we have about 5 minutes for questions if anyone wants to ask something. Or comments, maybe you can tell me I was terrible and sucked at this, and you know, anything goes.